All right, so I guess, so I'm Jaemie and this is Scott. We're on Dimmonen country out at Boustead. Work with the rangers. We did have some rangers here, but they've all gone out to spray weeds because we're running a bit behind time. But I guess sorry, let's go back to the start. I guess my reason for wanting to be involved in this is getting more rangers and that involved in these discussions and giving them a voice. It's often hard. There's a lot of scientific stuff and we go to a lot of these conferences and stuff, and often I think people get overwhelmed by it also. Trying to find ways where we can engage people. So we do a lot of work. I've been out here for sort of 10 years on and off, and just building their confidence to participate in all this, and having this network is just really good for them to present at conferences and go to conferences and learn. So I guess that's one of the most important things, is that communication, is having a place where you can share all this. So I guess when we do our videos, here's an example. I'll play a couple in a minute if they work. But it's having a comfortable setting. So we try not to produce Hollywood movies or anything. It's just more of a chat. It's an ongoing discussion and learning. And so this one, you'll see in a minute, they're just sitting around a fire, so it's sort of a bit set up, but we sort of stick a camera in their face, often freeze up, so comfortable environment where we just try and get them talking, and we sort of gradually slip away, and that's when the really interesting discussions come, and they talk in language and in English and that. And just, it's an ongoing process. The whole carbon fire thing, I've only been doing it a couple of years, so they're still learning about it, and it's great for them to see other rangers from Arnhem Land and places. We've done a lot more, but trying to create that, you know, we're not saying this is what you got to say. We've got a few, try and guide them, but basically giving time for them. And it's very hard for them, you know, they've got to talk their own language or languages, and Creole and English. But by doing the movie, it's actually in the doing of it, I think it's important, is the learning. It's not so much the finished product for other people, it's actually them making the movies where you can see them trying to put it into words. They sort of know, but having to put it into words to explain, that's when it really starts to sink in and they sort of understand it. So,
and through working with Jaemie and the rangers, you know, I've always found that as well. It's the learning process is in creating the resources, you know. So you might go out one day and shoot something and they'll kind of not really hit the mark, and then, you know, the next day you go out to film and it's almost spot on. So it's just that learning process and giving them, you know, the chance to explain it how they would explain it to their fellow countrymen and things like that in their language. And then, you know, maybe they go home and think about it that night and sort of understand where they went wrong, and then the next day is usually always a lot better.
And so we did that workshop. I haven't got the pictures here, I don't think, but we did a workshop at the last TNRM conference where we brought in lots of art sort of things, get them tell their story that way. And they came up, like a lot of people talk about this Firebird, which seemed to be one of the most important things they wanted to talk about. So it wasn't about, you know, carbon or this and that. It was that. So it's actually creating places for things to come up that you wouldn't normally think about. So I've just got a couple of examples here. If they play again, it's that just casual chat. So this is, let me know if this is coming through all right. And here's another one. This was part of that 10-minute thing we did the other day.
Question: what is fire project thing more about? So, what is thinking like? What for this fire project? Like, I'm trying to control them about fire, no? So the whole project is trying to talk to every art station, every group, namely understand and keep focus like keep understand what trying to do, you know. A lot of about like country, like animals, plants, like thing, you know, them dreaming, that kind of
So again,
Well,
trying to
actually,
create.
come on, question
Sorry.
what
I'll go to the next slide. So that was a trick I sort of watched from, there was some women from Nooka talking about their Creole program, and they got each other to ask each other questions, and that just sort of, they're much more open up when each other's asking questions rather than me putting them on the spot or something. So just another couple of resources. I don't know, anyone got any thoughts about any of that stuff? You want to chat as we go?
I thought it was really beautiful how everybody was making a fire together.
Yeah, and if you're talking about fire, then have a fire. That sort of seems like a concept.
And it was actually another little tool actually to make them feel comfortable, you know what I mean? Like they're a bit fidgety with their hands and things like that. So we just said, you know, let's just do a little fire and, you know, use that as a bit of a tool.
So it's another resource, I don't know if you know about, but the Northern Territory sort of legal aid and criminal stuff, they do a lot of resources. So there's this whole plain English dictionary explaining all legal terms. It made me think maybe we need a plain English dictionary for fire terminology or something, because, you know, people start talking about accused this and that, and it just goes over a lot of people's heads. So maybe that's something we could look at. And there's another one, if I can. So this is from the Aboriginal Interpreter Service. So again, legal. Can everyone see that all right, that screen? Can you guys read that? So some tips here.
Oh, actually, sorry, Jaemie, can you just expand it in your browser? Not much better, but yeah, anyway, that's all right.
Anyway, if you go to just Google Aboriginal Language and Plain English Guide, it's the NT government, nt.gov.au Aboriginal Interpreter Service. But they've got all these tips about, like, I'll read the headings: use active voice, avoid passives, avoid abstract nouns, avoid negative questions. So, example, instead of if you tease the dog, you will be bitten, try if you tease the dog, he will bite you. So it's just being very clear in your language. So, you know, all the metaphors and that people who are used to speaking English all the time take for granted, understanding that those things. Avoid negative questions. Instead of isn't he the boss, try is he the boss. I don't know. But it's a great ideas in chronological orders, multiple clauses, if and but, hypothetical things. So some really good tips on how to do plain English presentations and discussions. Where are we? Back to the, I guess the big one that rangers always tell me is there's too many charts and maps and stuff, and they just, half the time when you see presentations, I can't actually read what's on the charts, and I'm educated in the Western world and I can't understand it. So somebody who doesn't understand it would just have no hope, I think. So just, I guess, try and minimize use of those sort of things. It's like, again, we take for granted that people understand, you know, what an x-axis and a y-axis and what that actually means, this dot out here. So just, and I guess the other thing is this grounded theory approach. It's sort of like an approach to research where you just listen to stories, don't think, and look for common themes rather than having it all, the answers before you start. Actually just collecting stories. So we do a lot of that, just collecting fire stories and say, what's the things that come through? So one example I often think is whenever you talk to Aboriginal people, they always talk about burning grass. Or not always, I don't generalise too much, but then other people talk about burning country or burning this, but I don't hear people say that. I hear them say burning grass, and it's quite different, you know. So I don't know if that's, I find that quite deep. People, it's a very specific thing. They're burning the grass. They're not burning the country or burning this or burning that. So that's just an example of being open to listen to those little differences and what comes through. And the other thing that always comes through, it's all about food and hunting. And, you know, most of the fire stories have got something to do with collecting food in some way or other, which makes sense. So I think that's about all. Anybody else want to? I didn't want to do too much here, just put a few ideas that guide us, and happy to hear other stories. Ben and Scott, you might want to catch up more one day about multimedia stuff. So Scott runs, I don't know, do you want to talk any more about?
Yeah, well, I guess with broadcasting, I oversee audio broadcasting. So we have a radio station in 3 communities. We have a newsletter. And then we also have social media to use, you know, visual aids such as videos and things like that. So I guess, yeah, just having those channels of communications is always handy. And a lot of assistance from Jaemie, I have to admit, from when I first came in, and his experience and background of working with the community for 10 years really, you know, helped me, because I was just, you know, coming in as an outsider and just really missing the point when I was communicating with people in the Boustead community. So yeah, just those little tips that Jaemie showed me over the years has been really handy. And it's just important to really take that on board for when you do want to, you know, communicate stuff, because people can lose interest really quick if we're just bombarding them with all these high concept and long, you know, these big long seminars in English. Like I noticed it at a media festival I went to with my team, and as the day wore on, like, you know, our mob and, you know, the other sort of little remote Indigenous media organisations, the local people there were sort of pushed to the back of the room and sort of just disengaged a bit. So there was a lot of, probably just a bit too much of a bombardment of English and things like that. But yeah, communications is important. And we're very lucky to have those 3, you know, those 3 ways we can do that, which is audio, visual with the video, and then, yeah, the newsletter, which is coming really handy.
But Scott,
Jaemie, I was just wondering if anyone else had anything they'd like to contribute.
I just want to ask Scott one quick question. I think obviously you mentioned, there were some good tips you provided, especially just, you know, taking cues from people like Jaemie and some of your colleagues in the community you work with. But even from your own experience, what have you found has been some of the best ways to communicate your message to the community?
It's time, like spending a lot of time with the people and with my team anyway, and then sort of sitting down if we're going to communicate the idea or the message that we want to get out there, and just taking their lead. Like, how would we say it? You know, how would we structure this message? How would we deliver it? Is it better, you know, on the social media, or is it going to be better in print when people can have that in their hand? So it was really reliant on my local team that guided me and, you know, told me how to explain it. Instead of me just going, we need to explain this, let's do it. Like, this is a bit of a story. The first thing I did was I came here and had a script sent to me for, what was it, local decision-making policy or something from the NT government. And my idea was to get that whole script, get it translated word for word in Murrumbidgee, and then deliver it to the community. And then we did it, and it just made no sense. No one understood it, and it was just completely ineffective. Then we went and reshot it with one of our broadcasters, and we just explained the idea and the idea we're trying to get across, and he explained it in his own way. So it's really important to,
That's probably a good point. Do 1 or 2 things really well, rather than a lot of things badly, perhaps.
Yeah, sort of one idea we found. One point we're trying to really
one idea at a time.
Yeah.
Do you want to join us, Malcolm? This is Malcolm. He helped make that movie the other day. I don't know if you guys saw it. And Malcolm was the one asking the questions, and I think that was really good because Malcolm kept driving them. What do you think works for sharing stories? What's the best way? What are people best way to learn more about this carbon and fire?
Where we work with other ranges.
Work with the other rangers?
Yeah,
So,
from other communities.
yep, so that's
Yeah.
sharing between
Yeah,
ranger
sharing,
groups.
yeah.
That's really important. Yeah, our rangers were really impressed going out to Mimal Rangers.
Yeah.
That time they sort of been talking about that. It was over a couple of years ago now. They're still talking about it. It was a very big thing for them. If you want to learn more about fire, where would you go to find information from? You want
We go out bush,
to go out bush?
to burning.
And what about, like, you've got Aboriginal knowledge and all the science with all the maps and stuff? How do we bring those two together? Do they work?
Yeah, they were.
So you're learning more about all this carbon and stuff? And
Yep, I'm learning more. Good to learn.
what would you rather, like a movie or a Facebook or a newsletter or painting, or what do you think?
Movie, newsletter, newsletter.
You like the newsletter?
Yeah.
You read that, Cardi Diminin?
Yep,
That's it there, guys, by the way.
that one.
I don't know if you can see it. That's our last edition. So yeah.
Okay.
We've got a little community calendar there as well. We can share that around later. Yeah, having that visual aid in the hand always helps as well.
Something to take home. That, I guess phones, people use phones, don't they? No one's really got computers at home or anything. So
No, only phone.
So everything, I guess, has got to be either phone or newsletter or something.
Social media.
So the social media works because you can see it on phones. And
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Kristina, did you have anything to say?
I think these guys did a great job at summarising it. I think it's really about trying to work out what the key point is and then communicating that rather than all the ancillary detail that, you know, maybe we're into because we do it every day and that's all we talk about and it sort of seems to make sense. But then, like the other day I started talking to someone and, you know, we're talking about carbon projects and they're like, oh no, but what's carbon? Like, and you know, you start and explain it and then, you know, eventually we got to the fact that actually you go right back to, you know, every plant and every animal as it grows, you know, there's this material that's carbon, right? That, you know, is a building block and, you know, you sort of go to that, go back to that and not assume that, you know, just because we're living and breathing it every day, it's, it makes intuitive sense to everyone. I think that's important. And then the other one, I think people touched on is sort of thinking about who your audience is, right? Like if you're telling a story to community, it's going to be a bit different than if you're telling a story for, you know, some carbon buyer in Sydney or something, right? And some of those things that were talked about in the workshop just before and the presentations just before about, you know, corporates wanting to have a certain take on it, that might be quite different. And I think you've got to be really conscious of that and make sure that that doesn't compromise your story, but also make sure that that doesn't become the story that you tell to people in the community.
Thanks, Bruce. That's really great points. And I'll take it. I can see you there. I'm just wondering whether you can hear us and whether you're whether you're at your computer. Are you there, Taken?
Muted.
We can't hear you. We can see you, can't hear you.
Oh, why? But we can't hear you, Taken. You're unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
I'll stop sharing. How do I do that?
Just stop sharing.
Taken, we can't hear you at all. Are you? It might be your headphones. Maybe the headphones need to be plugged in a bit. If you push it in a little.
What I'll do is just take the headphones off and
That's
use
working
my.
now.
You can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry to waste your time, everybody. Yeah, thanks. Nice to jump in and great to see the Thamarrurr Rangers there. I really enjoyed your video. Great to hear you talking about all your strategies. Yeah, I'm interested. I'd totally agree with Kristina there in choosing your audience and choosing your points. Easy to make things very complicated. My experience, I guess, is trying to take research and talk to people both in communities and in all the different sections of the carbon industry. And I find it's really difficult to get the audience level of detail right while still keeping the message authentic. So yeah, something I really struggle with, and I'm very interested in people who are doing it well. So thanks everybody for putting it on the table and talking about it.
I might just jump in and add one other thing that we've come across a fair bit, and it was touched on before in the previous one, but it might be relevant here. It's just to think about permissions and where your story goes. So you pick your audience, but then once it's out there, it's kind of out there. So especially when you're working with partners that, you know, are maybe publishing or sharing your story, either on your behalf or in collaboration, it's just to always make sure that there's boundaries on how and how long for, and in what context they can share that. And part of that, for example, is we try and always have rules around what happens if there's photos or videos of people that then pass away. So what's the rule then? Because at that point, you know, if you've done a video for a partner, you know, that's filming some old people, then what's the rule, right? At that point it's out there. Are there any obligations for them to stop distributing that, for example? You know, just thinking about some of those things beforehand, because they get a bit tricky sometimes, and sort of culturally insensitive at times as well, and often not intentionally, but people just don't know. So it's just about thinking about those kinds of provisions before. So we try and be really quite tight in any media or collaboration agreements that involve any use of photos or recording or video or telling a story.
Yeah, I guess for me, sometimes as maybe on the other side of that arrangement, I've just found iterative agreements really useful. So where the agreement is that you go back to people and agree again on exactly what that final product is before it goes out. So it, you know, it can be quite a barrier to communications if you're constantly trying to define. So I've, you know, that agreement to go back and check with people again is much harder with, I guess, your static media. But once it's made, it's out. But certainly like with written word stuff, try and go back to people again and again. It's been a bit useful.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just wondering, Fiona and Claudia, would you like to turn your videos on and say hello? 6 people in the session, so it's a small, friendly one. May not be at that computer. Well, thanks everybody. You know, it's up to you. We can continue this discussion, or otherwise we can wrap it up and go into the economic opportunities one. What would you like to do?
Well, I think is there anyone that has any burning questions, or are you currently experiencing some issues in this space? How does everyone feel? Is there anything that they want to actually sort of get answered, or ask some questions, or do you think this session, the last session, sort of covered maybe some of your burning sort of issues?
I think we're on way, but it is, the burning issue is, and it comes up all the time, just as Scott said in his conference, start off everybody there, and by the afternoon, a lot of Aboriginal people have sort of left because sometimes it can be too scientific or too. So I think we've always got to be conscious of that and keep sort of working towards how do we make that more inclusive. And ICIN is, you know, such a good network for getting our ranges up there. So I think we're well placed to keep pushing that discussion. I think it came up again at the meeting the other day, the general meeting, that people felt there wasn't enough Aboriginal representation there or something. So I guess it's something we can always do better at, and by having that clear message, making sure we're clear what the purpose, you know, because often like people here, even trying to explain what we're doing here is hard to rangers. Who is this? Who's on the other end of this? So you have to, it's an ongoing challenge, and I think we just be honest about that, and we do the best we can, but we can always do better.
Yeah, agreed. I really enjoyed the earlier session. To everybody who made that happen, thanks very much. It was really great to get all those inputs. Lots of ideas came out of that just powerful voices about some of the risks. It was really interesting conversation. So thanks for that. I'm happy to jump into the economic opportunities one. So yeah, thanks very much.